Our mission is to dive deep into this rule book, detailing foods we are told we must never ever eat, and, maybe more importantly, specific combinations that are allegedly accelerating aging and disease from the inside out.
Yeah.
There isn't really a discussion about, balanced eating in the usual sense. It's more of a chemical and biological deep dive into industrial food processing based on these sources.
And what's fascinating here right away is that the sources aren't just going after the obvious villains like, candy or soda.
Right.
They target items most people perceive as pretty healthy or at least benign. The material immediately labels common staples, like, say, a glass of orange juice,
Right.
as being no better than pure sugar water once it's been industrially prepared.
That's the key theme then, isn't it? The villain, according to these sources, is the processing itself. So let's jump right into that first theme. The liquid and hidden sugars trap. If we look at orange juice, what exactly are the sources claiming happens when it's pasteurized?
Well, they really emphasize that pasteurization is essentially cooking the juice, high heat.
Okay.
And this process, they claim, destroys the natural enzymes and, frankly, much of the inherent nutrition.
So what's left?
What you are left with, according to them, is basically refined liquid carbohydrate. It leads to a massive, really rapid spike in blood sugar.
Without the fiber or anything
Well,
else to slow it down?
Exactly, no biological buffer. And the sources paint this picture of the industrial supply chain that's, well, it's pretty complex.
Yeah.
They note that some juice is concentrated down, stored in these huge tanks for maybe up to a year.
A year, wow.
Before it's shipped, reconstituted with water, maybe some flavor packs added back in, and then put on the shelf.
Okay, so the name they give it, liquid candy, starts to make a bit more sense when you hear about that level of, disconnection from the original fruit.
Precisely. And interestingly, that concentration issue carries right over into dairy, specifically flavored yogurt,
Ah, yogurt, usually seen as healthy.
usually. But the claim here is stark. We should avoid about 70% of all purchased yogurt.
70%. Why such a high number?
Because if you actually calculate the sugar per ounce in many of those fruit on the bottom or sweetened yogurts,
Yeah.
the sources assert it often contains more sugar than a serving of ice cream.
More than ice cream, seriously.
No, that's the claim. It's often marketed for its probiotic benefit, right?
Yeah?
But the sources argue the high sugar content actually feeds the bad gut pathogens
Oh.
more than the friendly microbes, so it kind of undermines the whole health claim.
So they're calling it a probiotic gimmick, really designed to sell sugar.
Pretty much. And when they advertise it as low fat, that fat is often just replaced with even higher amounts of sugar.
Right.
Alongside, artificial colorings, red dye 40 gets a specific mention as a common sensitivity, and cheap fillers.
Okay, fillers. What kind are we talking about?
That filler is where we find a huge piece of this puzzle, according to the sources. Cornstarch.
Cornstarch in yogurt.
Yeah, as a thickener. But the sources stress that cornstarch, being a processed starch, acts worse than traditional sugar on the glycemic index.
Worse than sugar.
How? It spikes blood sugar even faster. And the sugar itself, the added sugar, they claim actively inhibits the body from absorbing any calcium benefit the yogurt might contain.
Wow. So what's the alternative they suggest?
The recommendation is pretty specific. Plain, whole-fat, grass-fed yogurt, ideally from cows producing A2 protein, or kefir.
A2 protein. Just quickly for listeners who might not know, why A2?
Right. A2 refers to a specific type of beta-casein protein in milk. The sources suggest it's an older, more naturally occurring form,
Okay.
and it's often better tolerated, less likely to cause digestive issues compared to the A1 protein found in most commercial dairy today.
Got it. So if we broaden this idea of cheap fillers beyond just yogurt, we move from cornstarch to this entire industry of modified starches, which is apparently, a $12 billion business?
Yeah. A juggernaut, yeah. This is described as the truly invisible filler in modern food.
Invisible how?
Starches are cheap, right? And they're essentially a massive chain of sugars that spike blood sugar rapidly. To camouflage this, the industry uses, the sources say over 50 different names.
50? Like what?
The most common ones you'll see are modified food starch or maltodextrin.
And the processing details in the sources are, frankly, a bit startling. Making this stuff apparently requires up to 10 chemical processes, degumming, bleaching.
Intense stuff.
But here's the detail I want to focus on. The sources cite that the FDA allows up to 55% of modified starch in a food product. And they give Doritos as an example, saying they're 53% modified starch.
Yeah.
If the FDA allows this percentage, How are the sources justifying their claim that it's chemically worse than sugar? Are they basically saying the regulatory standard itself is flawed?
That's exactly the argument. The sources claim that yes, the regulatory standard for quantity doesn't reflect the biological quality or impact. They argue that the chemical alteration, the intense processing, turns these starches into these highly concentrated, super easily absorbed sugar chains,
Leading to...
straight to rapid insulin resistance and inflammation, according to the claims. They strongly recommend swapping these invisible fillers for natural starches in their whole form, things like, butternut squash, plantains, red or purple potatoes.
That seems like a clear principle then.
Mm.
Avoid the isolated and heavily modified ingredients.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move into section 2. We're pivoting now from hidden sugars to processed proteins and fats, starting with soy protein isolates.
Ah, yes.
This is where a lot of common protein supplements and weight loss foods seem to take a serious hit in these sources.
They issue a really strong warning here. Soy protein isolate, they state, is not a natural food for humans. Simple as that.
Why not?
It's described as a cheap, isolated protein. The critical detail they focus on is the extraction process. It requires harsh solvents, notably hexane.
Hexane, like the industrial solvent.
Exactly. Sources claim this process leaves residues that can agitate the liver and really mess up the gut biome.
And you find this everywhere, right? Protein shakes, vegetarian patties.
It's ubiquitous, yeah, especially in foods marketed for health or weight loss.
Okay. And then we get to one of the items flagged as most inflammatory of this material, seed oil mayonnaise.
This is a heavy caution, definitely. Sources claim something like 99% of the mayo on typical grocery shelves uses soy oil as its primary foundational ingredient.
And soy oil is a seed oil.
Right, which they categorize as inherently highly inflammatory. It apparently undergoes up to 10 chemical changes, bleaching, high heat, use of hexane again for extraction.
Okay.
The resulting product is described as extremely heavy in omega-6 fatty acids, with little or zero omega-3 to balance it out.
And the sheer volume of consumption is key here too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Soy oil apparently accounts for over 55% of all oil consumed in the U.S.
Huge amount. And the sources add another layer, claiming 95% of that soy is GMO soy, heavily treated with glyphosate, the herbicide.
Wow. And why does this matter so much, according to them? What are the health claims?
This matters because the claims link this hyper-processed soy oil to creating more obesity and diabetes than even fructose.
More than fructose.
That's the assertion. And it's strongly implicated in fatty liver disease as well.
So if I'm trying to buy mayo at the store, I need to be really careful. What about those olive oil mayonnaise options? Are they okay?
That's flagged as a major trap to watch for. Often, it's mostly soy oil, with just a tiny amount of olive oil added, maybe just for flavor or marketing splash.
Sneaky.
Very. You have to read that ingredient list closely. The alternative recommendation provided is mayonnaise made specifically with avocado oil. They mention brands like Primal Kitchen or Chosen as examples.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap up this section with the final processed items mentioned. Commercial meats and that highly processed cheese stuff.
Right, the cheese. The standard itself is quite telling. If a product contains less than 51% actual cheese,
Less than half.
manufacturers legally must label it something like a pasteurized cheese product or cheese food.
And the ingredient breakdown for those products is, well, it's something else. Skim milk, canola oil, modified food starch. There's that filler again.
The sugar filler, yeah.
Whey protein, tons of salt, and potentially zero actual cheese.
Yeah.
Yet they melt perfectly and don't even need refrigeration sometimes.
That ability to just sit inertly on a shelf, that's the giveaway, isn't it? It lacks the biological structure, the life of actual food.
Makes sense. And for commercial meats.
The advice is pretty direct. Avoid nitrates in common items like bacon and sausage. Sources claim they're linked to cancer risks.
But the alternative.
Nitrate-free, ideally grass-fed meats. And for milk, the sources specifically caution against the presence of the RBST hormone.
RBST, remind us what they are.
RBST is a synthetic bovine growth hormone. It's used mainly in conventional dairy farming to boost milk production.
Right.
The sources advise opting for organic or specifically labeled hormone-free milk alternatives to avoid it.
Okay. Let's pivot now to section 3, the danger of combining and cooking. We kick this off with the ubiquitous protein bar. So many people rely on these for quick fuel.
Yeah, but the sources deliver a pretty blunt verdict here. Most protein bars are actually worse than candy bars.
Worse than candy. Even the low-carb ones.
Even those marketed as low-carb, yes. They are often extremely high in total sugars. We're talking 30 grams up to maybe 47 grams per bar.
Wow.
Plus, they have those hidden starches like rice, tapioca, corn syrups.
And I bet they often contain that soy protein we just talked about, processed with hexane.
And yes, plus inflammatory seed oils and what the sources called junk food fibers.
Junk food fibers, what are those?
Well, fibers meant to add bulk without calories, things like isomaltooligosaccharides.
Okay.
We should probably clarify that this is often a highly processed fiber replacement. Sources claim it can cause pretty severe digestive distress, bloating, pain.
Not ideal.
No. And they also link it, along with artificial sweeteners, like sucralose sometimes found in these bars, to promoting insulin resistance.
So the recommendation is pretty clear. Skip the bars, eat real, whole protein instead.
Essentially, yes.
But the single biggest chemical warning in this whole stack of material seems to relate to food combining and heating. Specifically, the creation of something called advanced glycation end products, or AGs. Tell us about this chemistry.
Right, AG is. What's fascinating here is how the sources transition from ingredients to the intrinsic chemistry of cooking itself.
Okay.
The dangerous combination they highlight is protein plus sugar or refined carbs, or fat plus sugar or refined carbs.
So macronutrient combos.
Yeah, especially when subjected to high heat. Think BBQ ribs, meat protein, sugary sauce, high heat, or ice cream, high fat, high sugar, or, well, anything deep fried.
Why is heating this combination so much worse? What happens chemically?
Heating these combinations together apparently creates an explosion of these AGEs.
Okay.
The sources claim these AGEs cause massive internal oxidation. They use this vivid analogy of rusting out the inside of your body.
Rusting.
And they make structural proteins like collagen in your skin and arteries become sticky, brittle, and stiff.
That sounds disturbingly like the physical mechanism of aging itself.
It really does. And the sources directly link AGEs to major degenerative diseases. High blood pressure, macular degeneration, diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's.
So these are like the chemical signature of accelerated aging.
That's the implication, yeah. And the absolute worst offenders, according to these sources, convenience meals. Think TV dinners or pot pies.
Why them specifically?
Because they combine everything at once, right? Protein, starch, sugar, you've got the crust, the meat, the gravy, sometimes even a little dessert bit.
All heated together.
Exactly. That combination creates a perfect storm for rapid AG creation and consequently massive insulin spikes.
So the countermeasure is obviously trying to avoid sugar, especially with protein and fat under heat. But do the sources suggest anything else, any way to mitigate this?
They do. Besides avoiding sugar, they suggest some anti-glycation substances. Things like aged garlic extract, carnosine, which they note might be helpful for cataracts,
Interesting.
and benfotiamine, which is a form of vitamin B1, apparently good for countering AG effects, particularly in diabetic neuropathy or vision issues.
Okay, so it's a dual focus. Prevent formation through diet, but also maybe use supplements to mitigate damage already done.
That seems to be the approach, yes.
All right, let's transition now into our final section, Section 4. This shifts our focus pretty dramatically toward the principle of freshness and flow. And it draws from some unique yogic traditions that tie food preparation directly to energy levels.
This is definitely a radical shift, isn't it? Moving from laboratory chemistry to, well, energetic well-being.
It is.
The yogi tradition cited gives a very strict rule on preparation time. Maximum consumption time after cooking is apparently 1.5 hours.
Only 90 minutes.
90 minutes ideally, though up to 4 hours is deemed acceptable for certain items. But beyond that, the food should be avoided.
And this links directly back to that enzyme discussion we had way back with the orange juice, right?
Exactly. Cooking destroys enzymes. So when you eat food that's devoid of those natural enzymes,
Your body has to work harder.
your body has to struggle, yeah.
Yeah.
It expends huge amounts of energy just to process and reconstruct what was destroyed by the heat and time. This leads to that immediate post-meal energy drop many people feel.
The dreaded food cough.
It could be related, yeah. And this energy drain connects directly to the concept of old food and something called prana.
Prana. Tell us more about prana in this specific context.
So prana is defined in these sources as basically vital energy or life force. It's specifically described as being concentrated between the navel and the throat.
Okay.
The sources critique modern civilized eating, which relies heavily on old preserved, canned, or plastic-wrapped food from the superstore, stuff that could be weeks or months old.
Right.
They claim that Old food or certain tuberous foods like potatoes that have sat around too long generate gas below the navel.
Okay, gas. And how does that affect prana?
This gas, they claim, physically restricts the upward flow of prana. And since prana fuels the region between the navel and throat, which includes the brain, this restriction is claimed to impede cognitive function.
Leading to?
Lower dynamism, difficulty focusing, maybe impaired thought processes, less mental clarity.
So the actual freshness of your meal, beyond just its chemical composition, is directly tied to your mental clarity and energy flow, according to this material. That's a profound connection.
It really integrates the biological consequence with an energetic effect. It loops back to the idea of food as fuel if your food requires a massive energy cost just for digestion, or if it actively restricts the flow of vital energy, it ceases to be truly restorative.
Fascinating. Finally, just a quick note from the sources on modern fruit, which most of us consider universally healthy.
Yeah, fruit is generally intended by nature for health, right? But the critique here is that today's commercially farmed fruit is often made for the market, not for the man. Meaning it's cultivated primarily to be bigger, rounder, look better, last longer on the shelf. The sources use this description, like Botox, for fruit.
Oh.
They claim it lacks the strength and aliveness of older, maybe wilder or country fruits, and is therefore often nutrient compromised, needing fortification sometimes.
And we absolutely have to mention the DDT warning here. That's quite specific and a bit alarming.
Yes, definitely a jarring note. Sources explicitly suggest avoiding fruit from certain countries. Mexico and Chile were named where the American banned pesticide DDT might still be in use.
Bring it back into our food supply through imports.
That's the concern raised, yes. A reminder of how interconnected global agriculture is.
So after diving through all these warnings and rules, what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to navigate the grocery store or just make dinner?
Well, I think the synthesis is pretty clear when you step back. The central theme running through almost all these points is avoiding isolation, avoiding intense processing, and avoiding hyperconcentration. You need to steer clear of those cheap fillers like modified starch, avoid isolated proteins like soy isolate, and recognize that highly refined liquid sugars, whether they're in juice or yogurt, they just override your body's natural satiety and processing mechanisms.
And it seems like much of the warning really centers around standard industry optimization, doesn't it? Using the cheapest possible ingredients, like soy oil, maximizing shelf life, maximizing palatability through chemical refinement.
Absolutely. Practices which, according to these sources, fundamentally disregard or even harm the body's natural biological processes.
So here's a final thought for you to consider. If these sources suggest that simply combining common macronutrients, protein and sugar, fat and sugar, and heating them creates these advanced glycation end products, these AGEs, that accelerate aging and disease, what might be the real long-term cost of consuming a diet where almost every convenience meal we grab, almost every processed food, involves these combinations? That's a profound question, I think, about the trade-off we make between modern convenience and maybe our long-term health and vitality.
A very provocative thought indeed.
Indeed. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more health podcasts.